The porn sites of the day would be like, shrink your Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Business Plays. I am your boy with the I am your boy with the blaze. This one is history's greatest forgeries. First of all, I gotta tell you that this video is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace, you can make a great website with Squarespace and it's super easy. That's not what I have to say. Head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your website, just go to squarespace.com/blaze. And you get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. More on them in a bit. I really like forgeries. Not like the forgeries themselves. Obviously, I'd rather have the original version of something. But I find the whole thing fascinating. Like taking something like art and replicating it to such a degree, like using those original paints from the era and all of this stuff. I just find it fascinating. I think I find it fascinating the same way that like cons are fascinating or like replica stuff is fascinating. It's like this whole process interests me. I don't know why. I think if it was a career path, I could have definitely gone into forgery. I mean, that sounds interesting.
FBI, open up!
Anyway, also, allegedly, someone who definitely wasn't me, as a kid, might sell fake or, copied CDs. And someone who definitely isn't me would spend a long time sweating over the details and, getting the CD printed with the label just right and everything like that. Definitely wasn't me who found that stuff super interesting. It can often be, we're talking about history's greatest forgeries, by the way. If you're new here, welcome. Welcome. What happens is Danny writes me a script. I will read the script and add some jokes. And Sam, our resident memologist, will add some fine memes. By the way, this shirt, the Keep Calm and Blaze On, is available in green. I don't have it in green because then it would shine through to my green screen back there and you wouldn't be able to see anything. I mean, you wouldn't be able to see me. You'd just have this weird hole in the middle. Also, that's not really a green screen. I just did order a green one yet because I just didn't. It can often be a really tricky business working out what's fake and what's real and how much of it really matters anyway. It's speculated by some that up to 20% of paintings now hanging in major galleries around the world are forgeries. It's not completely unfeasible, but when Vincenzo Perugia first nicked the Mona Lisa from the Louvre in 1911, he got his mate to start painting some copies, and the original was never returned. Incidentally, that's the smartest way of making money from an art heist. Steal a famous painting, get about 20 forgeries made, secretly sell 19 forgeries to dodgy art dealers who will all believe they're buying the stolen original, send one of the fakes back to the gallery with a small letter of apology, and then keep the original to hang on your living room wall without anyone suspecting that it's the real deal, which is allegedly on display in the gallery. Maybe that's exactly what Vincenzo Perugia did. Fascinating. But my point is, if the Mona Lisa, now hanging in the Louvre, is a forgery of such high quality that it's fooled experts for over a century, then does it really change anything for the hundreds of millions of people who have enjoyed looking at a nice painting? I've never seen the Mona Lisa. I don't think I've actually even been to the Louvre. All I know about it is there's that great, I know a lot about it because it's the Mona Lisa, but one thing I do know about it is how disappointed Andy Samberg's character from Popstar was when he saw it and then he wrote a song about it. It's like, where are your eyebrows? And I think the whole song, the main lyric is, Mona Lisa, you're an overrated piece of Mwah! And my general comment is that a lot of stuff is really overrated. You travel somewhere and you're gonna go to France, gonna see the Mona Lisa, and you get there and you're like, oh, it's really small, and it's behind this big thick piece of glass that's quite a distance away. The number of stuff that I've seen and been disappointed in has been really high. One thing I wasn't disappointed with was actually the Rosetta Stone, because it's massive. I'd always seen the Rosetta Stone in textbooks and you're like, yeah, it's probably this big. It's this giant brick. And you're like, whoa, Rosetta Stone, it's big. But now, when you guys go see it, or whatever, you'll be like, well, it's not as big as Simon said, is it? And you'll be disappointed as well, and that's kind of how it works. Does it really matter if the artist was Leonardo da Vinci or a bloke called Bob who knocked up a few copies in his shed over a wet weekend? My argument would be, yeah, it kind of does, Danny. Kind of does matter. I suspect that a forgery only makes a genuine difference to the people and organizations who actually buy the paintings under misleading circumstances. And there's certainly some good money to be made from bogus imitation, something even the ancient Romans were quick to figure out. They were the first to introduce a forgery law in 80 BC when they discovered that scoundrels were falsifying documents describing the passing of land onto heirs. And in the complete lack of any original Roman culture, the sculptors of the time also enjoyed just replicating the works of the Greeks. The idea of just copying ancient Greece became quite hip again in Europe during the Renaissance period between the 14th and the 17th centuries, which brings us nicely onto one of the early master forgers from this golden age of art. You might have heard of him. His name was Michelangelo de Ludovici Buonarroti Simoni. But all that matters is we call him Michelangelo down the pub because, well, it's easier. And oh my god. I can imagine that when the legendary Italian artist finally completed his work on the marble statue of David in 1504, he was able to stand back and observe his latest masterpiece with some degree of satisfaction. For look how small I have made his penis. The reason why, I think I actually made a video about this on one of my channels, the reason why the old statues have small willies is because back in the day, like having a small willy was like, oh, it's a sign of like intelligence or nobility or something like that. It was like seen as a good thing. So that's why all the old statues have little willies. All of the porn sites of the day would be like, shrink your He probably felt glad that he'd been talked out of the idea of turning it into a novelty vodka fountain. That would have just been silly. That is a little bit of sprinkled in OG Business Blaze joke there. And I like that this is now an OG Business Blaze joke, the salt sprinkle. And he may well have considered just how far he'd come in the last 8 years, bearing in mind that in 1496 he was a starving artist who had resorted to incredibly dodgy dealings. Back then, nobody was particularly interested in new art created by people who had the audacity to still be breathing. Classic works from long-dead artists were the only stuff bringing in the big bucks. Michelangelo had already hit upon the clever idea of borrowing original paintings. Borrowing. Oh wait, no, he actually did borrow the original paintings, making a copy of them. Okay. There was a borrowing idea, he was literally borrowing the paintings, copying that and then selling it. And then giving the copy to the owner while keeping hold of the original himself. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't object to that. Like, there's some paintings that I really like. And I'll be like, can someone, an artist, just copy that so I can have it hanging on my wall that's, not like a cheap poster from a museum or something, but looks like a painting. No one's going to believe that I have like $100 million painting hanging on the wall, but it'll look like it. It'll look like this original painting that I enjoy. I'll be like, yeah, okay. I'll be pretty happy with that. And how much will it cost? Like a few grand to have like a copy made? That sounds kind of cool. I would definitely do that. And then giving the copy to the owner while keeping the original for himself. Oh no, so he copied it and kept the original. Michelangelo, you thieving dickhead. But by far the biggest scam, allegedly. Michelangelo is not going to sue me. He's been dead for at least 10 years, 100 years, hundreds of years. But by far his biggest scam was a copy of the bronze sculpture Sleeping Eros, a life-size depiction of a winged little boy having a quick nap on a bit of rock. It was originally designed by an unknown Greek sculptor in the 3rd or 2nd century BC. Michelangelo, still only 21 at the time, copied the sculpture and then buried it for a while to artificially age his new work with scratches, dents, and stains. Then he teamed up with art dealer Baldassare de Milanese, who sold this dirty copy for a small fortune to Italian Cardinal Raphael Riario. It took a while for the Cardinal to realize that it had been duped, after which he immediately returned the copy to the art dealer and demanded his money back. But he didn't seem particularly angry with Michelangelo himself. Yeah, Michelangelo just copied it. He didn't sell it to him, but he did. I'd still be pissed off at Michelangelo in this situation.
My bad. Still figuring out the buttons.
In fact, he was so impressed with the forgery that he became Michelangelo's first patron in Rome, a move which would help elevate Michelangelo's career to new heights. About 13.4 meters, in fact, all the way up to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. But Michelangelo had already become pretty famous anyway by the time the Cardinal spotted the con, having completed his work on Pieta sculpture commissioned by a French Cardinal. So this meant that the art dealer didn't do too badly out of the swindle. He was easily able to resell the returned fake Sleeping Eros statue as it was attached to the now bankable name of Michelangelo. The fake statue was eventually acquired by Charles I of England, although it has been missing for centuries and is presumed to have perished in the Great Fire of the Palace of Whitehall in London in 1689. It'd be glorious if someone's like, yeah, no, I found it. And they just made it and buried it in their garden for a while to age it. Ironically, the dirty forgery would be worth an absolute fortune if it still existed today, far more than the original thing. But this is a very rare example of a master forger showing off his true potential and awesome talents by so brilliantly reproducing the works of others on his way to becoming one of the greatest artists that ever lived. Not every case of forgery is destined to end up showered in such heavenly glory from a height of 13.4 meters. I think really also maybe the whole penis thing with Michelangelo's David was more like Michelangelo could then be to all like the ladies, like everyone would be super familiar. He just did a favor to men everywhere because he'd be like, yeah, look at that statue of David, bigger than that. That's average, ladies, right there. It sounds as if the US art dealer Eli Sakhai was using a spin on the idea of selling duplicates of the same painting, but without ever resorting to theft, which is always the trickiest and riskiest bit. After emigrating from Iran to the US in 1962, Eli opens a number of small art galleries in the 70s and 80s, legally snapping up paintings from lesser-known artists along the way. He would have some of the paintings copied by a team of Chinese immigrants secretly beavering away upstairs in one of his galleries. He would often get about 3 or 4 copies made of each painting and then sell the forgeries to Japanese collectors along with one of the genuine certificates of authenticity that had picked up during the original purchase. Apparently, most Japanese art collectors never bothered with the hassle of commissioning experts to authenticate the paintings. They just trusted the certificates. Oh boy, but you can forge those as well. That's the trick. Once he'd sold all the copies, he would then sell the original to an American art gallery, who were usually a bit more fussy about their purchases. It's reported that over the decades to follow, Eli made about $25 million from these shady dealings. The thing about an operation like this is that it can quickly get a bit complex and has the potential to spiral out of control, as Eli would eventually discover in the year 2000. It recently sold a few forgeries of Paul Gauguin's painting Vase de Fleurs from 1885. As you might be able to deduce from the title, it's a thrilling picture of a vase of flowers. Sam! I suspect it didn't take too long for the Chinese immigrants to knock up a few copies of this one. Once he'd sold the fakes, he decided it was time to sell the original, which he put up for sale at, which he put up for auction at Sotheby's in their May 2000 catalog. Yeah, but what about all the people who thought they bought it? Aren't they going to come back and kill him? Because it'd be like, the people who buy forged art are very rich and probably very criminally. And at some point, I feel like, yeah, I'm auctioning the original for like $100 million, and the guy like I sold a fake to for like a few million is going to be like, now I know it's a fake, and I'm going to come back and chop your head off. But what he hadn't counted on was the fact that one of his Japanese customers had decided to auction his supposedly original copy of the painting at Christie's at the exact same time. Uh-oh! But it didn't take long for the two auction houses to realize that they were both offering the same original painting in their May catalog. So wow, is that specific? That is unfortunate. Following expert examination, the forgery was discreetly withdrawn from the Christie's catalog, while the sale of the original was allowed to go ahead at Sotheby's, raking in $310,000 for Eli. That's it? Wasn't this by Gauguin? Or however you say his name? I've heard of him, he's mad famous. That seems like super reasonable when like a Picasso would be like 120 mil. It's like, oh, okay. Gauguin? He didn't have much time to celebrate the sale as the FBI paid a visit to his gallery very shortly afterwards, and they weren't very interested in buying a bit of artwork. After pleading guilty to 8 counts of wire and mail fraud, Eli was fined $12.5 million. Oh, he's also going to prison! And ordered to forfeit 11 works of art, obviously. And he served 41 days in jail, that's it? Dude, you did this for like 40 years, you made $25 million, they took away half your money, and you went to prison for like just over a month? Bro, I like your lawyers, man. Your lawyers are good. But Eli always maintained his innocence afterwards and claimed that he only pled guilty in order to resolve his differences with the government and put all of this mess behind him. Yeah, when they're like 41 days, you'd be like, yeah, I'm not guilty, but I'll take it. Because if I roll dice in court, I could be going away for like, I don't know, a million years. Today, he still runs an art gallery in Great Neck, New York, so if you're ever paying a visit and your eye is drawn to a painting which looks a bit battered, just remember to ask him if he's got any copies in better condition upstairs. Oh, the video's not over, although I don't know why I threw the script down like that. It's just time for me to tell you about something wonderful, something glorious, something that keeps this channel going. Squarespace, a loyal and thoughtful, kind, considerate sponsor. Squarespace allows you to make, let's get down to nuts and bolts, because that's why you guys, like, if there's a sponsor, it's like, you don't care if they're kind. They could be like Hugo Boss, like supporting the Nazis, allegedly, and all that shit. Squarespace, no, they allow you to make a beautiful website. I was thinking about making a website for Business Place, and then I was like, yeah, but what's it gonna be like? Just gonna have like Danny's script up there with all these in-jokes that no one's gonna get. Seems a bit like weird. Like, if I made a Business Plays website, what should be on the Business Plays website? Let me know in the comments below, and then maybe we can make it with Squarespace. But I made a website for Mega Projects, which is another channel I do, which is a bit more serious, and the content would be like, oh yeah, okay, I can put that as a blog post or an article online, let's do that. Megaprojects.net is where you can see that. Bear in mind, I have no design skills, and I made this like super clean, easy, nice looking website It took like a day, and then obviously I had to upload all the articles, but I had my assistant do that because I don't want to. But I was like, hey assistant, can you just upload all this stuff? It's like ridiculously easy. And they were like, yeah, of course. And then, also Squarespace, this is a feature that it's not on my list of things to talk about, but you can invite people to manage it. So I was like, look, I can't do all this myself. I'm making like 1 billion videos. So you can invite people to like manage your pages for you, manage your websites for you. And I was like, that is super handy. There is stuff I do have to tell you about. Squarespace also has member areas. So if I was like, you can become a Mega Projects member. I should say that with less sarcasm because it's a talking point, but you can see why this would be useful for people. Email campaigns. Oh yeah, I commented last time that I pay a lot of money to do an email newsletter. Like, it is surprisingly expensive to have to do email newsletters, and apparently Squarespace just can cover all of that stuff for you. So I said I would cancel it, and then I forgot. So I should probably do that after this, and then get all my emails going out through Squarespace because it's included. You can collect donations if you're so inclined. Social sharing. I mean, obviously. Of course you can social share shit, isn't it? It's the internet. That's like the easiest thing. If Squarespace is like, yeah, we don't do social sharing, you're like, well, I guess I'll go somewhere else then. I mean, I guess it's a selling point. Analytics, of course, blogging tools. Of course, it's the internet, Squarespace. We all know you have this. But the point is they all make it really ridiculously easy. Squarespace.com is where you go to start. You can basically do the trial for free and you can make your first website. And then when you're ready to launch, you go to squarespace.com/blaze and you get 10% off your first purchase of a website or a domain. There's a link below. I went off script there, but look, I used Squarespace myself. I used it to make the megaprojects.net website. I used it to make my own personal website, which I'm working on launching. It's not that Squarespace is hard to use. It's just like I made the website and then I never launched it. I should launch that. Jesus Christ, Simon, get your shit together. Let's move on. The Secret, there's a link below for Squarespace. Support the show. The Secret Diaries of Adolf Hitler, aged 43 and a half. It sounds like one of those Adrian Mole books that I read as a kid. I suppose it might have been grimly fascinating to take a peek into Adolf Hitler's private diary and gain a fresh insight into what made him tick. October 1939. Really hate those Jews. Maybe we'd have been treated to such enlightening diary entries as September the 1st, 1939. Spent 40 minutes queuing at the post office. Some dozy pensioner pushed straight to the front of the queue. It's no wonder this country's gone to the dogs. Invaded Poland. Had mashed potatoes and broth again for supper. Followed by sauerkraut. For decades following Hitler's death, there was speculation that he'd kept diaries which may or may not have been destroyed when a German plane carrying 10 heavy chests of valuable documents crashed into a forest near Dresden. Much later in 1982, German magazine Stern announced that the lost diaries had finally resurfaced. And not just one of them. The recovery included no less than 60 volumes of Hitler's inner thoughts. Oh, we know these are fake though. That's wild. Stern had agreed to pay the equivalent of $3.7 million to buy the lot from the bloke who found them, while the Sunday Times newspaper, owned by Rupert Murdoch, that classic dickhead, allegedly, had in turn agreed to pay Stern magazine about $800,000 to be the first paper to publish the juicy highlights. Which was all a bit of a shame, really, as all 60 diaries were proven to be forgeries, just as the Sunday Times had got started on publishing the first few chunks. And it turns out that Stern hadn't just been scammed by the bloke who wrote them, they were also screwed over by one of their own journalists. Oh, shit. So let's rewind a bit. Konrad Kujau was born in Germany in 1938 and had grown up as an impassioned devotee to the Nazi cause. Until it's over, and as we joked before, no, absolutely it was not a Nazi. Get it under the rug! Although he'd briefly owned a bar and a cleaning business, he was close to poverty by the 1960s and taken to forging luncheon vouchers, leading to his first very brief spell in prison. During the 1970s, he discovered that he could buy Nazi memorabilia quite cheaply in East Germany and then flog it at inflated prices all over West Germany. It was technically illegal, but the worst case scenario was that you got your goods confiscated, so Konrad began pulling in some good money during this period. I went to Ukraine. I went to visit Chernobyl a few years ago, and I was in, God, what's the capital of Ukraine? Kiev. And we went to this market, and there were these stands, and they were like selling all this like Nazi shit from like back in the day, and I'm like, that's dark. Like, why have you got all this Nazi shit? I guess it's to appeal to like tourists who are like, whoa, Nazi shit, but I'm like, I don't want that. Let's burn it in a fire. This was technically illegal, but the worst case scenario was that you got your goods confiscated, so Conrad began pulling in some good money. And then he figured out that the memorabilia would go for even more money in West Germany if it carried some kind of celebrity status. So for example, he would take a standard helmet from the First World War, forge a document which claimed that Hitler once shoved it on his head at Ypres, and then charge about 10 times the original value. Later on in the decade, he upped his game. I love how like people just believe in certificates. It's like, what is a certificate other than a piece of paper which says something? Like, what would this be? How do you authenticate this? It's got a certificate, it must be legit! Later on in the decade, he upped his game by producing paintings, notes, and poems, which were all purported to have come from the hands of Hitler himself. The clever thing about Conrad's strategy is that his customers were unlikely to ever get this stuff examined and authenticated by an expert, as they wouldn't have wanted to draw attention to their disturbing Nazi obsessions. This would almost have been as bad as admitting that you were a Justin Bieber fan. Almost. Yeah, this is the same thing. It's like, who wants to buy Nazi memorabilia? It's a bit weird. Like that guy in American Beauty. It's a bit weird, dude. By 1978, Conrad had hit upon the idea of forging his first Hitler diary, and this caught the attention of Stern journalist Gerd Heidemann, who himself was a bit of a Nazi nut. Apparently convinced that the diary was genuine, Gerd eventually managed to convince Stern magazine to buy all 60 volumes that Conrad was quickly churning out and pick up the scoop of the century. But in his role as a middleman, Gerd was swindling both the forger and his own employers by grossly exaggerating the amount of money that Conrad was demanding from Stern magazine and then pocketing the difference himself. What a legend. It's like double dipping. The exact amount that he made from this deal is contested, but it probably would have been at least enough to buy out the 60 volumes of The Rantings of a Madman. Rupert Murdoch himself was closely involved in the deal with Stern to serialize the highlights in his Sunday Times newspaper. Rupert Murdoch just hack in and steal them. It's more your style, isn't it? Allegedly. And he got his own independent director, the historian Hugo Trevor Roper, more commonly known as Lord Dacre, to examine and authenticate the collection of diaries. Hugo Trevor Roper, with the commonly known name of Lord Dacre, sounds like that's like his online gaming name, but I assume it is because he's actually a lord of something. It's like, yeah, you can call me Lord Dacre. It's like, alright dude, what in COD? Lord Dacre initially declared them to be genuine, proposing the quite reasonable question, who would have forged 60 volumes when just 6 would have served his purpose? But he should have, yeah, that's a reason. But he should have maybe taken a closer inspection. The books were actually very crudely prepared and rife with careless spelling mistakes and modern phrases and anachronisms. In order to achieve an aging effect, Conrad had just dunked them all in tea and bashed them about a bit. It sounds like what you do when you make something look old for like a school project when you're 7. Perhaps the most blindingly obvious mistake was on the front covers. Conrad had meant to glue the cheap synthetic initials AH onto the covers to represent the author, but had mistakenly glued on the letters FH instead, giving the impression the books may have been written by Fred Hitler. Who makes that kind of mistake? It also appears that, what's that for? It stands for Führer Hitler. Führer. It also appears that Conrad was a little bereft of inspiration when it came to composing some of the actual content. Some of the killer entries include the likes of must get tickets for the Olympic Games of Eva. On Eva's wishes, I'm thoroughly examined by my doctors. Because of my new pills, I have violent flatulence. I mean, that's the kind of you'd read in a diary though, isn't it? It feels like, yeah, I mean, not every entry is going to be like super interesting. Even with Hitler, not every entry is going to be filled with hate. Because of the new pills, I have violent flatulence like a Jew. At the 11th hour, just as the Sunday Times was getting ready to launch this world exclusive, Lord Dacre changed his professional opinion and publicly denounced the diaries as forgeries. Great timing, Lord. Murdoch's response to the team at the Sunday Times was blunt. Fuck Dacre, publish. Forensic reports later confirmed that the fake diaries had been written in modern ink, and 4 editors in 3 different countries ended up losing their jobs over the scandal, including the editor of the Sunday Times. I'm just doing what Robert said! You're fired! Rupert Murdoch, classic dickhead, allegedly. Murdoch himself probably didn't care if the diaries were genuine or not. He still managed to shift more copies of his paper while they were running the extracts. Conrad Kajal was sentenced to 4 years and 8 months in prison for fraud, while journalist Gerd received the exact same sentence for embezzlement. And although Conrad became a minor TV celebrity for a while in his release, he couldn't resist one last forgery before his death in 2000. He got fined $2,000 for forging a load of driver's licenses. Hopefully not with Hitler's face on them, as he couldn't even drive. That idiot. Signature tune. Bit of a bump. Signature tune. Finally, just a brief word on a certain Hungarian man who may go down in history as the most successful, certainly the most prolific forger of all time. But was he ever really breaking the law? Oh, the questions, Danny. We need to know the answers. Elmyr de Hory forged well over 1,000 paintings during his career, but also appeared to have fabricated an entirely fictional life. He claimed to friends, including Marilyn Monroe, Liz Taylor, and Rita Hayworth, that he was born into an aristocratic family, and his father was a wealthy Hungarian ambassador. In fact, he came from a fairly unremarkable background. During the Second World War, it's believed by some that he spent a long period in a German concentration camp for the double whammy crime of being both Jewish and homosexual, but this may just be an invented story. Yeah, I mean, it seems like he does make a lot of stuff up so far. We do know for sure that Hory got into trouble very early on in life and was convicted 10 times across 5 European cities with stuff like check fraud, forging documents, and falsely claiming an aristocratic title. Well, you know, it is calling into question some of his stories, isn't it? Although he initially had dreams of becoming a reputable artist, he found that he could get a hold of a lot more money by mimicking the works of classic artists such as Picasso and Matisse, and he raked in a small fortune from the 50s to the 70s, selling over 1,000 faked paintings while adopting a variety of pseudonyms and aliases to keep his own identity a secret. He was briefly imprisoned in Spain, but not for art fraud. He served a 2-month sentence for homosexuality, showing no visible means of support and consorting with criminals. But it wasn't until 1976 that the FBI and Interpol began a full investigation into de Hory's suspicious art dealings, at which point the forger took his own life by overdosing on sleeping pills. But here's the thing. Elmyr de Hory always claims that he never signed any of his paintings with the name of the artist he was mimicking. And that's an important detail. Painting in the style of another artist is not a crime in itself. Yeah, otherwise, I mean, I'd be in big trouble for doing such perfect duplicates of Yoko Ono's music. It only becomes illegal if you sign the painting with another artist's name. He also strongly questioned why forgeries should necessarily be considered inferior to originals, which brings us back to my opening point. De Hory was able to fool experts and deliver pleasure to art lovers with his paintings. What difference does the true identity of the artist really make to anybody? I don't know. One's the original, one's not. Elmyr de Hory spent his years painting a picture of his life history that never really happened, and some claim that he may have even faked his own death to avoid prosecution. If that's true, it would be quite a fitting final masterstroke to possibly the greatest forger of them all. This has been an episode of Business Blaze, brought to you by Squarespace. Check them out below. Also, if you'd like to get your hands on some sweet-ass merch, purchathemerch.co. Thank you for watching. Like a Jew.